All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about reducing the risk of a perfect storm of violence. We want to do some quick introduction. I am Mike McCarty. I am the founder and CEO of Safe Hiring Solutions, former law enforcement. I was a violent crime detective with the city of Nashville, Tennessee for many years. Done a lot of consulting work for Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Homeland Security. A little bit about Safe Hiring. We have been around since 2004, so about 17 years. We have 7,000 clients all across the United States. So we're in all 50 states. We even have international clients. We work with lots of public and private schools, church and ministry, Kiwanis International and youth serving organizations. We do work with companies. And so really our client base is very, very diverse, but we do have a special niche of working with youth serving organizations. So we have several different companies under the Safe Hiring umbrella, and we'll kind of go through a lot of what we do here in just a little bit. But we've got Safe Hiring as the parent company. We do background checks. We have Safe Visitor, which is a visitor management system. We have Safe Volunteer to manage volunteers. Learning Zone, Assessment Zone, I'll talk about here in just a little bit, and RefLink. So there's a number of companies underneath our umbrella. And, kind of our partnership with Keystone is we put together, discounted pricing. And so it is, an added value for a lot of you as you work with your insured, to give them access to different security related products at a much better value than they would be able to get on their own. So what are we talking about with this perfect storm? I mean, I just had a representative from a fire department walk out of my office because we're talking about assessments for some local school districts. And I said, as we're coming out of COVID, we have been fighting a war on one front. I said, we have totally lost sight that there are other wars going on other than just COVID. And so we haven't fought this multi-front war. And, one of the things we're seeing as a result of that is a lot of tunnel vision on COVID. And because of that tunnel vision, here's a few examples of some things we're seeing with schools as we're working with them. We know, and especially after Parkland, research is pretty clear that during an active shooter event, those classroom doors that are shut typically are passed over. And so that became a standard policy, closing and or locking doors during class. And what we're seeing over the last 14 months or so is we started to open these doors. We're concerned about ventilation. And so we're starting to rescind some of these security policies that we've been putting in place for decades in some instances. Backpacks and lockers. I know I've still got 3 in public schools, and my daughter in the middle school is carrying a backpack everywhere she goes. I mean, if she doesn't have back problems by the time this school year is over, it's going to be a miracle because everything she owns is in that backpack. And so, the carrying everything around with you, we saw the shooting in Idaho last week, brought a gun in her backpack. That's an anomaly on so many levels, not only the age of the shooter, girl, but just kind of a glimpse into where we're going here with this perfect storm. All these, kind of rescinded policies of seeing classes going outside the building, taking walks, meeting on the front school grounds. So just as a kind of primer, for what we're talking about here, just really looking at, everything we've done, we've got to kind of open our eyes now because the world is opening back up here in the United States. Some of us are in communities where it is open. Some are opening, some are getting ready to open. And all of this, as it starts to happen, is going to have an impact. It's already having an impact. If I actually go down to my very last bullet point on this slide and work my way back up, we've had nearly 200 mass shootings already in 2021. I mean, that's on track to be more than any other year in recent history. I'm in a suburb of Indianapolis. We're on track to have almost 200 murders if it keeps up at this pace. And knowing we haven't even hit the warm season, summer, where a lot of these numbers go up. So we're seeing a lot of this already. And so, what is some of the impact? What are we talking about this perfect storm? What about this impact from COVID? Well, you've had a huge increase in suicide and suicidal ideations. Seems to be some evidence, what I'm seeing in media, that may have been a driver in the recent school shooting. Huge increase in domestic violence. I know here in Indiana, because I know what the numbers are here, because I talked to the executive director of the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They have seen a 130% increase in domestic murders in the state of Indiana. That's after like a 20-year decline. All of a sudden now they've had a 130% increase. Understanding that domestic violence is the number one workplace violence issue that we face. So all these things that are happening at home, this increased violence and domestic violence and mental health issues, we got increased child abuse. Some of this is undiagnosed. It's undetected if the kids have not been back in school. They're not in contact. They haven't been outside the home. So you're starting to stir this perfect pot of everything that's been happening. And then we increase isolation. So we've been isolated, we've been away from people, and how all of this is impacting where we're going is our clients, our businesses, our schools, our houses of worship, as they're opening back up. All of this is coming back to work and worship and school, and we need to be prepared to be able to recognize and manage this. What we have, so as you work with organizations, we have a 360 myriad of solutions here that we can provide organizations. At the top, foundationally, we started as a background screening firm. We a multi-layered approach. We have quality assurance, eyes on these reports. There's a lot of bad data that's sold in the background screening world. A lot of instant products, a lot of unverified information, and verification of information becomes more challenging year after year as more courts start to redact more and more personal information. They've been taking social security numbers out of the court records for years. So now you're looking at a John Smith, and I've got to have some way of being able to identify and make sure that this criminal record is your John Smith. And so, looking at, having high quality background checks, number one, that it doesn't miss any serious criminal record. And number two, you don't want anybody mislabeled as having a criminal record that doesn't belong to them. We have a volunteer and employee management system. So for your larger organizations, we can manage this entire process. That is from the application all the way through the background check and even the renewal process. We can automate that. If your clients want a background check every year, they want it every 3 years, every 5 years, we create that interval and the system talks to them 30 days before the background check expires, sends them a link, they renew. So this is a completely paperless process as well. We have a tool called RefLink. RefLink is an automated reference checking platform. And how does that fit into this kind of 360 model? Well, if I'm a youth serving organization, what I know as a former violent crime detective is the vast majority, less than 80% of sex offenders have a criminal history. So if we're talking about a criminal element that we want to keep out of our organization, And we're only doing a criminal background check. We're not checking references or other sources. We have about a chance of failing on sex offenders 80% of the time because they've never been detected. They do not have a criminal history. So RefLink can be used as an email or text-based model of getting to other people and gaining feedback where you might be able to connect some dots or red dots before you allow them into the organization. Arrest Alert. This is probably the most game-changing solution on the market today. We have no other screening firm that we know of has anything like this. Arrest Alert is an integration that we've created with about 93% of the jails across the United States. So with Arrest Alert, it is a post background check solution. So once the background check is complete, and let's say you hire them, you bring them in as volunteer or a vendor, once they're approved, then it moves them over to Arrest Alert, puts them into a database, and we get real-time updates for the jails and booking institutions across the United States. So if one of your employees, one of your volunteers goes to Florida on vacation in Tampa, they get arrested for soliciting a prostitute or a child. That information, as soon as they're booked into that Hillsborough County jail, it is going to send a notification to the team responsible for background checks. It's going to send them a text. If they're using our visitor management system, it's not only going to notify the team, it's also going to block that person from being able to scan in or out of the facility until that arrest has been investigated, and the team either looks at that and investigates and comes back and says, you know what, it was a DUI, they're a volunteer, it doesn't impact volunteering, we're going to move them back to approved, or you're going to permanently deny them. We are just now launching a solution called the Learning Zone. And when you look at this kind of, if you Google, and look at some of the issues going on across the United States related to sexual exploitation of children, it is rampant in the schools, in our church and ministries, in volunteer organizations. And much of this is the Learning Zone was designed using national training experts to really help our staff and our volunteers understand grooming, community grooming, red flags, mandatory reporting, and be able to become protectors of the children in the organization. When they see things, if they've not been trained, they may not necessarily know what they're seeing. Maybe it doesn't look right, doesn't feel right. Simple things like, we know if we can reduce isolation between an adult and a child, just reducing that opportunity will reduce the likelihood of some type of child abuse or child sex abuse significantly. So we've got an online training curriculum that guides the volunteer or staff through that process. We've got a tool called Assessment Zone, which is a virtual security assessment. You see a lot of this on the school side. We're getting ready to convert Assessment Zone to a ministry option. And what that does is we can go out and physically do security assessments. Our team comes out of law enforcement, Secret Service. We have team members that served on presidential details. They've provided security at the UN. We've got FBI. We've got counter intelligence, Navy SEALs. We have the ability to go out and conduct these on site. That becomes very expensive. And so what we've done over the past year is we've built a software that is intuitive, that we can drive you through an assessment that then creates vulnerability recommendations, things to focus on. And it also provides you list of best in practice providers for those solutions that you may need. This cuts the cost of the assessment sometimes by 90%, where it might cost 10 or $20,000, depending on the size of the organization, to bring a team on site. These can be done, non-for-profit versus for-profit company, anywhere from 1,500 to, $5,000. And so it really cuts down on that cost significantly. And it now becomes part of their ongoing security plan. It's not a one and done. They're going to continue to use this over and over again. One that's not on this list that we've launched for schools is we created an app for SROs, and we had SRO associations come to us and say, hey, look, we are getting legislated out of schools in some states. We are having school boards that are removing us from, some school districts. And a lot of this is based on a belief system that this is some kind of pipeline to prison approach to law enforcement in the schools. Understanding a distinction between purely a school district who has a law enforcement agency as part of that school district versus a specially trained school resource officer, very distinctly different. So we created a mobile application for them to document what they're doing every day. And the data shows that, arrest or criminal justice intervention is a rarity. That is always a very last resort of what they're doing. So it's a data collection tool. We have a mobile app. So organizations, if I'm a volunteer in a public school, our largest public school, seventh largest in the United States, has 50,000 volunteers. Once they're approved, they immediately go into arrest alert and monitoring. They have a mobile app. And so now as they approach the school, maybe they're coming in to volunteer, as they approach the school, they could use geofence and it pops up on the front office team screen, or as they come in, they can scan in at a kiosk, or they can click a doorbell on their mobile app and check in. We've also built in the ability to do COVID check-in with that mobile app. So some organizations are using it for employees, some for volunteers. We have some schools looking at potentially using it this fall for students. And so every day when they open up that app for the first time, it's going to give them a list of COVID questions. These are created by each individual client. We have kind of a model that's in there, but that can be modified. They have to answer these questions, and it basically becomes an unlock screen. We don't store the data. We don't tag it to any one person or document or store that in the database. It becomes a key to unlock the app before they're allowed to move forward or to be processed in. It works within our Safe Visitor Management System. So Safe Visitor is a visitor management system, cloud-based. It can be kiosk-based. It can run at a front desk when visitors come in. If I don't know you, you scan in with your government-issued ID. We support all driver's license, government-issued ID cards, Canadian, Mexican consulate cards. Any of those will scan into the system. If I'm a high-frequency visitor, say like a volunteer or a vendor, then I actually have a barcode that is created on my mobile app once I've gone through a vetting background check and been approved, and I scan in and out with that. We have integrations with many of the top crisis or emergency management systems. So Safe Visitor has communication tools built into it. If an organization is using an alert system or a crisis management system, we can integrate our buttons with that emergency management system, which allows the security team to receive any kind of emergency alerts that would come out of Safe Visitor, look at those, determine if they needed to be pushed on to law enforcement. So all of our systems are built as integration hubs, reunification sites. So especially, this is very topical for schools. A lot of times other organizations may not have gone into quite this depth, but creating these security and safety plans, one component of that is a reunification site. It might be a natural disaster, it could be a tornado or a fire that you have to evacuate. And then how do you account for everybody? And so within our safe visitor system, we have a reunification module that allows you to set up quickly in another location and be able to check people in if it's students or juveniles, to then be able to pair them back to approved parent or guardians and document that. And then we have a cyber component, which has become really, really big in that most of the cyber programs that are out there today are really geared towards larger organizations that have deep finances to be able to do a lot of the cyber work. We have a partner that has created solutions that are really built for organizations that have not been able to afford a lot of this. And so it can start with questionnaires, it can go to software, proprietary software that's used to do testing on systems. And this is a solution we use on all of our systems as well. And then they do penetration testing as well periodically. So we kind of bring together this 360 model of everything we can do to help prevent things from happening for organizations. Everything we do is kind of geared towards the prevention. And then we have providers and partners that can help with intervention or with a crisis. That's a lot of information, I know, and we went through it very quickly. I am going to put this up here for a minute. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We would also be happy to set up kind of a one-to-one. If you say, hey, I'd like to see a demo of one, two, or all of these systems, we're more than happy to do that. And also to be able to provide, a pricing sheet for you. We can co-brand those with your agency and Keystone's information as well. But happy to help in any way we can. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'll just say thanks for taking a little time out of your day. We know you're very busy. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we will answer any questions you have. Otherwise, have a great day.